we've met her in the street. She wanted to get rid of Rebecca. She wanted to abort her. And when we met her, we said, look, don't kill this child. We'll take care of the child if you don't want it.
Welcome to Straight Talk on Life Issues, the podcast. My name is Victor Nieves. As always, joined by Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute. Before we begin, I want to share about our Life Defenders program, which is your opportunity to help us further our mission of saving unborn babies through vital pro-life education with your monthly donation. You can go to lifeissues.org and become a life defender today. We have a very special program for you today. Brad is actually joining us from South Africa.
That's right. And Victor, thanks to the technology we have these days, you and I can hold this conversation as well as our conversation with our guests. And it's going to come out amazingly, I'm sure, because these people have become extended family to me. This is my fourth trip down here. And it's always a joy to come down and work with Dr. Albu Van Eeden, Johan Clauson, who does so much for Doctors for Life. And it's just great meeting some new people at the same time. Dr. Combrink is a first for me, and you'll be hearing more about the topic of abortion pill reversal from her.
Well, it's a joy for you. It's a pain for me as I have to suffer through all of the beautiful pictures and the animals and the oceans and things like that. You got to rub it in, you know. But today we're going to be talking about defending life in South Africa, what it's like in South Africa, your experience, and again, we have some absolutely fantastic guests. So, Brad, real quick, what's it like in South Africa?
Oh, well, it's just marvelous. If I had to pick a country in which to live other than America, it would be South Africa, because you have the beautiful beaches of the Indian Ocean. Down in Cape Town, you have where the Indian Ocean and Atlantic Oceans meet, and they are met by majestic mountains. The people are incredible, joyful people. And it's not a hard place to love.
Well, maybe one of these days you're just going to leave us for good and end up in South Africa. But all of the good, set aside, what's the situation with abortion like in South Africa? Is it similar to the United States? If I had to guess, I would say it's probably strikingly familiar, no matter where you are, the pushing for abortion, the evil at the root. But what's the situation with abortion like there?
Yes, you're right in that regard. The struggle to end abortion is very similar here in South Africa as it is back home in America. And what happened here was in November of 1996, the legislature actually passed legislation that allowed abortion on demand until birth. It's so-called the Termination of Pregnancy Act. And it was the most controversial and the most unpopular piece of legislation here in South Africa since apartheid was introduced in 1948.
Well, that sounds somewhat familiar, I guess we could say, as what's happened in the United States. Certainly our fair share of very controversial legislation. We have joining us good friends of yours, fantastic people, great resources. First of all, Dr. Albu Van Eeden, the Chief Executive Officer and founding member of Doctors for Life International, a great organization. Brad, I'm sure you can attest to that. He's also the chairperson for the National Alliance for Life. Again, great organizations. We're also joined by Johan Clauson, Director and Coordinator of Aid to Africa, the humanitarian division of Doctors for Life International. He's worked closely with Dr. Albu. They've done fantastic work for over 2 decades, and he plays a vital role in the day-to-day operations for Doctors for Life International. In addition, we have with us Dr. Elsabe Combrink. She's a former district surgeon. She's now focused on rural hospital work. She does all kinds of great work in the medical field with Doctors for Life International. And this is special. She heads the abortion pill reversal project for Doctors for Life. I'm sure we'll hear more about that.
First of all, I want to say what a joy and honor it is to return to South Africa and be with my extended family again. So welcome to all of you to our show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Albu, let's start with you. What is the prevailing reason that women choose to have an abortion?
I think the main reason is unwanted pregnancies, and it's unwanted pregnancies amongst young girls, teenagers. I think there's very little control and actually, to a certain extent, organized crime involved in this. We had a phone call some time ago of a nursing sister from a hospital close by. She phoned, she spoke to my wife Karen, she whispered in the phone, she says, "I can't speak loud, can you hear me?" She wanted to know, "Can I trust you?" And she went as far as saying, now this is a rural hospital, this is not in a big city, saying that on Fridays the doctors working in the hospital go out, pick up girls, take them to a specific home in that rural area, and then have fun the whole weekend with these girls. And then if the girls fall pregnant and they need an abortion, they are taken to the hospital where these doctors are working, and they get their abortions done there. But a lot of that obviously is not organized. It's just people that are enjoying life, going to clubs and discos and places where the girls use drugs, they sleep around, they fall pregnant, and unfortunately, they say most of the abortions are done as backstreet abortions. Approximately 6 backstreet abortions for every one abortion done in hospital or at a clinic.
Well, it's interesting you should say that and bring up illegal abortions. Now, a woman can get a free abortion anytime during pregnancy in South Africa, but as you said, she still chooses to get one from an illegal, unsafe abortionist. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's quite obvious actually, because if she goes to a registered clinic or a hospital, there might be a family member or a friend working there that knows her and recognizes her. So she doesn't want to be recognized. If she wants to get to a registered institution, she must travel very far. It's expensive. She might have to take a day or two off school to go there. And so it is easier to just go to a backstreet abortionist where nobody knows you. It's quiet and it's secluded. Get the abortion. She doesn't even necessarily have to take a day off school. She gets the abortion tonight and tomorrow she's back at school again.
So it's not an issue of being afraid or not being able to afford it. It's just for personal autonomy and efficiency and time-wise then.
Yes, and they manage to get the money. Usually the boyfriend that's involved assists with the money.
It's more than happy to come up with the cash, huh?
Yes.
Or the rand, as we say in South Africa.
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Albu, I'm curious, if these women do go into these abortion centers, what's it like for them? What are they told?
I've heard of very few that have been offered to have a ultrasound or a sonar examination before the abortion. It's not even being talked about. It's not even being offered. I personally, when in practice, I personally have offered it to girls. The few I offered it to try and dissuade them from having an abortion, they watched everything. I showed them the beating heart. I showed them the movement. I showed them the baby. Later term pregnancies, even showed them whether it's a boy or a girl. And at the end, the girl just said, "Well, thank you very much. Could you please go ahead and give me an abortion or help tell me where to get an abortion?" You don't understand it, but of course their schooling is at stake. They don't want to stop going to school. And they are very harsh, and they experience short-term relief when they've had the abortion. Things like post-traumatic stress disorder kick in only 6 months up to 2 years after an abortion. So immediately they just want relief from this thing that's troubling them.
Dr. Albu, I've heard that women also visit witch doctors and shamans out of desperation to get an abortion. How does that work?
With the witch doctors, or what we would call nyangas. And nyanga is kind of the more socially acceptable word because it refers to a herbalist. But they're actually one and the same thing. If you speak to the Zulu people here, most of them say they don't know what's the difference between a herbalist or a nyanga on the one hand and the other hand, or a sangoma or a witch doctor. Well, basically what they do is they get potions. They get things that they insert vaginally that encourage abortion. It's herbalist stuff. Or they get things to drink, and it's very toxic. Usually, if they've had it, we know it so well. If they give birth, and if it's a late-term abortion, because our law is anyway so porous, you can have an abortion up to a day before birth. So if it's a late-term pregnancy and a late-term abortion, usually the babies are blue, and that's one of the signs. And then you get the stuff vaginally in the woman's vagina to show that they've put in all kinds of medicines. I don't know whether Dr. Combrink has something more to add.
The backstreet abortions that I know about, that I get connection with, the girls that come to me, that have regret, is mostly the ones who took the abortion tablets, the abortion pills, mifepristone or misoprostol. And most of them get it online. A few get it at the clinic, the hospital, the state clinics or hospital, and one had it from a private practitioner with Goldie's clinic, a female women health clinic. But I'm thankful I could speak to him and change his mind. And so he helped her after that. But, he helped her to recover again and to get the tablets, although I think she never did get it. But their problem there is usually financial. When it comes to reversing, to get the tablets, that costs usually around anything between 200 and 700 rand.
Out of experience, and I don't know all the details, but at our clinic in Mozambique, from Doctors for Life work starting off as a pro-life organization, the work expanded, and we now actually have 2 clinics already that we constructed. One is in Mozambique and one in Malawi. And in Mozambique, we've had quite a few cases where women have gone to witch doctors and then come to our clinic out of desperation and sometimes almost dying. And when the doctor would ask the lady what caused this, they would refuse to say until they eventually cannot keep quiet about it anymore. Of course, you need to know what type of poison they took to assist these women. So it is a big problem. Maybe Dr. Albu knows more specific examples, but I know that it's happened a few times at our clinic in Mozambique.
Is there any chance of saving the baby at that point?
It depends. As I say, the babies are very often cyanotic, which causes cyanosis, which causes the blue color. No, sometimes you can save them. There's quite a few that we have been able to save, but sometimes it's a stillbirth.
Well, referring to the witch doctors, or herbalists as they like to be called these days.
Yes.
Do you find that they're switching over to the chemical abortion pills as they're available, or are they still using the old standby remedies?
In South Africa, as Dr. Combrink has said, and allow me just to say Dr. Combrink is also one of our board members. We have 10 board members. And we are so happy that she's got this ministry to help these girls get hold of progesterone tablets to reverse the abortion procedure. But in South Africa, definitely chemical. And they even get it, she says, the most of the ones she's dealt with have received it online. There are backstreet sellers. They buy it at bus stops and places like that. The nurses working at the clinic just give the tablets, sell the tablets very cheap to someone, and the person goes around and make it available to the girls wherever they are.
Johan, let's go to you now with a question. How are pro-life organizations educating women on the dangers of abortion?
I think there's more that can be done. Doctors for Life have, over the years, developed a program called 11th Hour Counseling, and we train people who are interested, volunteers across South Africa, especially in the beginning, and how to deal with these cases, whether they go to clinics, which I think is not done as much here maybe as in America, but standing in front of a clinic, giving women the alternative, or advertising. We have been advertising these services as well in local newspapers, and then the women can, when they do have a crisis, and sometimes they don't know whether we're going to help them get an abortion or, in our case, actually educate them on that they actually have an unborn child in their womb. And in that way, we are able to actually reach quite a few women, and we've had wonderful success with that. Many babies have been born just through that program from Doctors for Life. And I believe there are other organizations that also do it. I don't know how many, but from Doctors for Life, that's what we try and do to reach out to these women, advertise the cell phone numbers or a counseling line, which they can contact when they are in a crisis.
We are on the social media with that, and at times we've been extremely busy, something like 20 contacts in one day, and people from all over the world. They come from approximately 35 countries, and from all over the world, the Far East, Middle East, West, different places, and then you counsel them. And we've had actually tremendous success there, because very often you have a very short time to speak to them. So you've got to pack everything you can into those few minutes, and then you don't know whether you hear of them again. But very often they come back to you, they tell you they've changed their mind, and they show you a picture of the baby. Now, why bother to show you a picture of the baby if they didn't follow your advice? I mean, there's no reason for them to do it. So the fact that they show you the picture shows you that they've indeed saved the life or changed their minds. And it's 20 calls a day, 15 calls a day. It's tremendous.
Do you feel that there's any one thing in particular that you say to these girls that provides to be that God moment that changes their heart?
Well, the person that does that is actually not here. It's Nina McNeil. But what I can say from what she said is she speaks to them and say that it's not the only solution. There is another solution that will not give them a guilty conscience for the rest of their lives. Because a woman has a conscience, even if she's a Muslim coming from a Muslim country. She has a conscience that accuses her. And I think indicating that and speaking about the conscience and not being guilty has tremendous impact.
On the abortion front, does the movement in South Africa incorporate women who have had a past abortion to talk to these women?
Very much so. Actually, we have adopted a girl, me and my wife. She's now 15 years old, Rebecca. There are about 14 pregnancy crisis centers, 40 that are helping these girls to deal with an unwanted pregnancy or assist them with adoptions. So we really try to a large extent. It's interesting that many of the girls that get referred to us get referred from the USA. I don't know, but somehow the USA's prayer companies and organizations' presence on the internet is just much more prominent than what we are here in South Africa. So they know us once they get calls especially for abortion reversals. They contact us and they refer the patients to us, and that's when Dr. Combrink can help them.
Well, first of all, I want to say that the abortion pill reversal and the online presence of pregnancy centers has gotten very sophisticated over the years to put a lot of research into the messaging that they send out, which is more effective. And perhaps if South Africa and other countries can really absorb and copy those techniques, you might be able to see your saves go up also. Dr. Albu, since you mentioned your daughter, Rebecca, such a very sweet girl who's now 15, give us a little more detail on how her life came to be and how she came to be in your family.
Well, Rebecca has had an opportunity to testify years ago that it first happened where there was a church conference and my wife was in charge of the children while it was a talk about pornography, I think, that I gave. But all the children were together. My wife was there, and Rebecca was also there. And Rebecca stood up, and she said, my wife said, each one can have an opportunity to testify. So Rebecca stood up, and she said, do you know there was a woman with such a big knife that wanted to kill me. But God saved me from that, and God gave me a new mother and a new father. And she's given this testimony quite a few times already. I can only say Rebecca has been an absolute sunshine in our lives. She's joyful, she's positive, she's really, she respects us as her parents. She loves us. It is just wonderful. And I would encourage other parents to follow our example.
Give us a few details about Rebecca's birth mother, because in America, had Planned Parenthood gotten a hold of Rebecca's birth mother, she would have been a prime candidate for abortion.
Yeah, she was HIV positive, and she was 15 years old. When we've met her in the street, she wanted to get rid of Rebecca. She wanted to abort her. And when we met her, we said, look, don't kill this child. We'll take care of the child if you don't want it. Rebecca was born, and because the hospitals are very full, you get discharged a day after birth. So the next day, Rebecca was left in front of our office in the Durban, in the Bay Area, with all the gifts we've given to this woman, napkins, baby milk for feeding the child, and soap for the baby and everything. Everything was just left in front of our office. And she was not interested in Rebecca whatsoever. And then my wife was very keen to adopt, and I said, hang on, you must be careful. These people let you have the child, and then after some time they want to make money out of you. They come to you and they say, hang on, you've stolen this child and you get into trouble and you must pay. So I said, go through the social worker. So we went to the social worker. The social worker said, no, you've got to first report it as an abandoned child. So we went to the police, and the police said, oh, no, now we've got to go and find this woman. And finally, they found her in a car with another client. She was into prostitution. She was taken to prison, stayed there for 2 years. Her pimp came, brought her out. And while she was in prison, Rebecca was given to her. When she came out, when the pimp brought her out, the next day, Rebecca was dropped in front of our office again. And from then on, Rebecca she could fit into a shoebox. She was so small.
And not only has she been a light to your family, but she's been a light to everyone who meets her.
She's been a testimony even to her brothers and family members.
Let's talk a little bit about the complications that women have after trying to abort their babies. Can any of you share with us a story that you recall of specific situations where women were having complications after aborting or trying to abort their children?
We were in the northern regions north of South Sudan for actually eye surgery outreach, and during that time we offer counseling as well and share a message with the patients in general. And a lady came to me afterwards of a secret that she's kept for many, many years. She said her husband was a soldier, and after parts of the war she would come home and then cause her to become pregnant. And she became bitter because of that. She felt she was just, then she has to take care of the children. So she actually killed, I think, 2 or 3 of her children in the process, never told her husband that she became pregnant, and sat with this burden for many, many years. And on that specific day, while we were there actually helping patients to see again with cataract surgery, she cried as she told us and asked for prayer. So that's just to add to the what women go through. And she was a changed woman after that. She was walking around at the hospital grounds. She did have children later. She was there, I think, with one of her daughters, and she was just a changed person. She was smiling and happy.
Maybe I can just add in your question about what do we offer. We've offered services and to adopt these children or take care of these children. So we have about 8 centers spread out across the country where we take care of children who do not have mothers, who have lost their mothers, or the mothers didn't want to have them. And I think about 120 children in total from these different centers that we take care of, help them to go to school and provide them with food and accommodation and everything.
I want to refer back to my co-host Victor. I don't want to put you on the spot. Dr. Albu referenced the opinion that we are overpopulated in South Africa. Do you recall the stats that you've gathered on this country in particular?
No, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember that South Africa was notably different than the northern regions of the continent of Africa. The northern regions in the continent of Africa have fertility rates that are sometimes above 6%, which dwarfs European nations. And I do remember thinking that South Africa was more similar to Western countries in having a much lower fertility rate. Well, Dr. Van Eeden, I'm curious, we touched on the chemical abortion situation a little bit earlier, but I want to know a little more specifics on that, because in the United States, it's estimated that about 70% of all of our abortions are done with these chemical pills now. You mentioned that there's been an increase in that. What's been the outcome in South Africa as it pertains to these chemical abortion pills?
Look, I think you've got me there in the sense that I cannot give you official statistics. The government is anyway not very sharp in keeping statistics on abortions in general. But what I do know is that the majority of people that present in hospitals as we speak to housemen, in other words, doctors that just shortly qualified, they are snowed under by girls that have taken the abortion pill. And to go to the hospitals for abortion is kind of becoming a rare phenomenon. Most of them get the tablets, but I'm sorry, I don't have figures for that at the moment.
Well, and one of the things that makes that sound a little more ominous is that research in America has shown that chemical abortion pills are 4 times more dangerous to women than a surgical abortion. So in a medically loose society such as South Africa is, yes, compared to many other countries, that gap is probably even more so than in America.
And if you get it in the black market, your gestational period is totally irrelevant. It's not taken into account. And that's why you get these girls that we lose people that die from this because they start using the tablets when pregnancy is too far developed, actually. And you should not actually be using the mifepristone anymore.
And of course, there's no way to determine if there's an ectopic pregnancy, that is a pregnancy outside of the womb, is there?
Yes.
Which can be fatal. Okay, Dr. Combrink, let's talk to you a little bit about your specialty, which I'm very excited to hear about because it's a budding effort in America, that is abortion pill reversal, reversing the chemical abortion pill after the first of the 2-pill regimen is taken. Describe the situation here in your country.
We haven't had many exposure yet. We started the first call that Dr. Albu had was in October 2021, and so it's just 2 years ago. And we've had 39 referrals so far, but most of them, except for 1 or 2, came from your abortion pill rescue group in America. They contacted online by the girls, and then they contact us so that we can try to help them further. And the big problem is always for them to get the treatment as soon as possible, because there's already the delay after they took the tablets, and then there's the time for them to consider and reconsider and finally find this abortion pill rescue center, and then from them to get to us, and from us to get back to the girl. And I'm afraid sometimes on the way, before they can really be helped, one lose contact with them. So the big thing is one need to give the abortion pill reversal within 72 hours since they took the tablets for the abortion, the mifepristone. There's where all these different problems come in. There's already a delay until we hear about them and start to contact them. And then there's the problem of the transport and the load shedding and the internet communication. The other problem is the cost. It's quite expensive. It's like 1,100 for the course. And sometimes if you need to give it a bit longer, it goes up to 1,700. Most often don't have that right, and they don't have it with them. Quite too many of the girls, the abortion progress is already too far, that by the time they can now get the tablets, they are already losing the little one.
Maybe I could just mention, Brad, that we started off at 100 miles an hour, a very high speed of helping these girls. Before Dr. Combrink was involved, I used to contact gynecologists who are members of Doctors for Life. And we have a good friend here in Durban, and a lady phoned and she wanted the abortion pill, and he prescribed it over the phone to a chemist where she could get it. And the next thing is we got a phone call back from her, and she said, listen, I'm a journalist. I phoned you and I faked to be a pregnant girl. Actually, I'm not pregnant, but your doctor has prescribed this progesterone tablet for me without having seen and without having examined me. And I'm going to the press with this. I'm going to make a big story out of this. Now, he just got cold feet straight away, this gynecologist, from that moment on. Then I went onto the internet and I noted that in the USA, you had this debate about 2 to 3 years before us. And there was a lot of public debate. I contacted ARPLOG, American Association of Pro-Life Obstetrics and Gynecologists, and they confirmed me. Donna Hughes, is it?
Donna Harris.
She confirmed to me that the progesterone is extremely safe. It's safe for the mother, it's very safe for the child, and they sent stacks of medical literature to us. And in that way, we felt free to carry on. But it was like cold water being thrown over us. Right in the beginning, we were only starting, and we got the fright of our lives. But then we saw we can't just let these chemical abortions carry on. And Dr. Combrink has been very bold. She's been prescribing it left, right, and center. And this lady, this journalist, never published anything. I think she must have realized nobody's really interested. It's gone, the debate has raged in the States, and it got nowhere.
I felt progesterone is safe. Mifepristone does no damage to the baby. It kills the baby by loosening the placenta so that the baby is starved of oxygen and nutrition. So it doesn't damage the baby itself. I'm safe on that way. So I can give them the progesterone, let them get the progesterone, and then as soon as they got it and they're settled and fine, then we get within the next few days, we try that they can get a scan to see is everything still okay, is everything still intact, and the fetal heart's still there, and unless, of course, they're too early. I feel safe on that ground, as well as with COVID. Online treatment and telephonic treatment has been more acceptable.
Well, in America, they've been using progesterone for at-risk pregnancies for 40 or 50 years without any problem.
Yeah.
And we had some personal experience in our church with a young woman with a history of miscarriages, and they finally provided her progesterone, and she delivered a sweet little baby girl last month. So it is a drug without any side effects. Yeah. It's as safe and tested for decades, as we said. Perhaps, Doctor, your grandmotherly, genteel approach is something that helps endear yourself to these women who are frightened and wondering if they're making the best decision reaching out for help.
Well, I hope it helps. It's nice to be called mommy by quite a few other people who I didn't know before and never saw before. And especially if they contact and say, hey, you don't even know me, you trust me and you help me. It's wonderful. It's really a great privilege to do this.
Well, have you had a chance to see or hold those babies you helped to save?
We have pictures of the 10 babies that's been born already, and the other 2 that's due at the end of the month. They keep me updated, especially the one. And if they have heartburn or they have a cramp or they have a thing, they want to know, what can I do now? And with the babies that's been born, I'm asked just as often. Then they've got cradle cap, then they've got discharging eyes. Now he's got flu and she's coughing and she's breathing like this. And they send me a clip to say, they say, well, I think this one better go see the doctor. Okay, I'm going.
Especially those first-time mothers. I remember with our first child, we panicked at a sneeze, I think, yes. Yeah. Of course, you are at a disadvantage for the reasons you described in getting the medication to women, having them connect with you. Do you have any idea of the percentage of babies that you've been able to save giving the progesterone to?
Yeah, our true success rate, the ones that could get the treatment, is 71%. But
Wow.
our case success rate is not as good. Case success rate is about 36%. And that's because more than 50% of the ones couldn't get the treatment. Or we lost contact with them, that we don't know, did they get the treatment then, or did they find the doctor that they were going to see, or didn't they? Did they get the treatment? Did the pregnancy progress? So, they like an unknown factor.
Well, I would imagine as word of mouth gets out there, and as you figure out more effective ways to let this process, this protocol be known, that you will see that increase, certainly.
Yeah, well, we hope so.
What is being done to stop the use of chemical abortions in South Africa?
Look, we've had a court case here of one doctor that spoke to his patient, a pregnant girl, about the humanity of our unborn child. He ended up being taken to court, and for 6 years they refused the HPCSA, which is the regulating body of doctors, refused to allow him his qualification. So to a large extent, people are very afraid and very reluctant to go ahead with that. And I think we should be more bold, and the Doctors for Life is trying to promote literature, pro-life literature amongst doctors and the general public, but we just feel we're doing far too little. We must actually do much more.
Dr. Van Eeden, has the church grown silent as far as the abortion issue goes? And if yes, why do you think that is?
I think the traditional churches are not just silent, they're divided in their convictions. And many of the people high up in positions in the churches are pro-abortion or pro-choice. And what we find is it's more small churches, house churches, that are active and help in this. And then the Pentecostal churches seem to be much more active and supportive of this.
First of all, I'd like to give Dr. Van Eeden the opportunity to talk about the orphan program that you have. I know that in America, they accuse us pro-lifers of not caring about women, just about, quote, end quote, the fetus. And here you have a very active, dedicated program to serving the orphans of South Africa. Could you tell us about that?
We have a double reason or a dual reason for that program, yes. On the one hand, Doctors for Life has a program where we reach out to girls in prostitution because we're a harbour city close by, Durban, with a lot of prostitution. We are very active in helping girls exit prostitution. And in many debates where we speak against legalizing or decriminalizing prostitution, we are being told, what are you doing for these girls? And so we were forced to take in these girls, and many of them, when you take them in, are already pregnant, and because they fall pregnant at a tremendous rate and they just keep aborting the children all the time. They're on drugs. They don't really care when they're high, so it's a high rate. In the second instance, we speak about abortion. We discourage women to have abortion, and we are being challenged and told, what do you do positively for these girls? So about 8 years ago, we started a project called Life Child. My wife is in charge of it. And it's a project where we have orphan care centers in rural areas where many of the girls that work in Durban come from. And the goal is, the reason is usually most of these orphanages or orphan care centers are in big cities. In our case, I think we are very unique that we are in rural areas, because the reason is we want the child to grow up in his community where the family is known and he's got some identity. And sometimes the parents leave something behind as an inheritance for the child. It might just be a mud hut with a few chickens running around. But if you can take care of the child close to that community, then the child can still have access to whatever the parents leave behind. Many of the cases, the parents, due to the HIV/AIDS epidemic, are in these rural areas. To mention two occasions, one occasion which we had was the little child, the girl was so young, I don't know whether she was 4 or 5 years old. The mother was HIV positive. We discovered the mother unable to walk, lying down in a mud hut with holes in the roof, straw roof. And this little child was fetching water from the river. She was too small to carry a 25-liter container, so she had a 1-liter container, and she would fetch water for the mother. We came upon them, and the child was cooking rice for her and the mother. The mother was lying next to the fire and giving her instructions what to do to cook rice for them. And the mother passed away shortly. And that's the one child we took in. The other case was the child was the parents had passed away, and this child wandered around in the village and played with other children. But in the evening, when the other children's parents would call them in, they didn't bother to call this boy in. So this boy would sleep outside, and the place where he slept was under a wheelbarrow. And that's how we found the boy. He would play with the children, and in the evenings through the winter, if the other children are called inside, he stays under the wheelbarrow and he sleeps there. And we took him in. So it worked hand in hand with our pro-life message, because a lot of other orphan children comes from women whom we discourage from having an abortion.
Well, that's very sobering stories in itself. Are there any other comments that you might like to make that we haven't talked about?
Well, I can just add, although it's not South Africa, but we, at our clinic, our first clinic in Mozambique, we have one of the major services we render to the community there is a maternity. So we do deliveries there at our clinic, and that's, of course, very pro-life. And although abortion is not officially legal in Mozambique, as far as I know, they do encourage the morning after pill, which we say that isn't a microscopic abortion. I'm not sure if it's changed now. Maybe Dr. Albu can help me there.
It has become legal now.
So, and we've actually had quite a bit of pressure put on us, being a non-governmental clinic, to perform these abortions and allow staff to encourage schoolgirls. Our clinic is right next to a school. Encourage them to have an abortions, and we just put our foot down and say no, regardless of the consequences. But by God's grace, we carry on. We've had, up since the time we started with the clinic, our statistics show we've roughly had about, I think, 3,000 or just over 3,000 children born at our clinic.
By God's grace, I hope to return and volunteer at that clinic in Mozambique.
In fact, there's a small child somewhere, if the child is still alive, but that was born there, and he was named after me, but not the Afrikaans version of my name. That's a tradition that they sometimes give that honor to a person who's helped the mother and the father with the delivery that they can choose, and my name was one of them.
By God's grace, we're looking forward to have you at that clinic.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Can I share this as well? Because we would love to have you there at the clinic, but there was something special that happened there once. And maybe some of your listeners and viewers knew about, we called it Prof. Pat McEwen.
A good friend of mine.
She came to South Africa regularly. She was actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Albu, part of our initial drive with 11th hour counseling. So in America,
Yes.
you call it sidewalk counseling. 11th hour is the last hour before 12, which we try and rescue these children and convince the mothers not to abort. And she really played an enormous role in that. But she later became also part of our medical outreach program. She visited our clinic in Mozambique regularly, quite often, once a year maybe, quite a few times. And in one of those visits, I was there with her. Now, she used to farm with horses, and she knew how to deliver little ponies.
And there were no doctors at the time.
At that
at the
time,
clinic.
we had a crisis. I was there, but we had no doctor. And a lady came in late at night, and Prof. Pat was there with another lady, and she actually assisted that woman. And it was a very difficult delivery. We had no time. Normally we rush, if that is the case where we have no doctor, we have to rush the woman to our nearest hospital, but it's a terrible road. There was just no time. I remember getting there at night. A couple of things went wrong that evening, and they were there with Prof. Pat trying to help this girl. And the delivery, by God's grace, went well. I later even sent a picture as the child grew up. I sent it to Prof. Pat when she was back in America. But during that time, I said to her, just look how wonderful God has allowed this. Your whole life, she's been fighting for the safety and for babies not to be aborted, for the life of the unborn. And this was the first time she was actually involved herself in bringing a child to life. It was something really special for her as well to be able to witness that firsthand. The reason why I mentioned about the ponies is because that was the only information she had as reference as how to help this lady in a breach. I don't know what the exact problem was with the delivery, but it really did help, and she actually saved a child literally that day.
And the child was called after her. Oh no, they allowed her to give the child a name. And the name of the child she gave him was Grace. Must have been a girl.
Always the humble person. The person, Prof. Pat, that Johan is talking about is Professor Patricia McEwen, who I traveled with many times internationally and had a real heart for not only the unborn but the downtrodden. You mentioned her many trips here. She made her last trip here while terminally ill with cancer and is buried on the grounds of this mission. So that just demonstrates her heart for South Africa. Well, I'd like to thank you all for taking part in this very special program of saving lives and protecting life in South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You know, in closing, Victor, the battlefront here in South Africa is pretty much the same as it is there in the United States. And one of the big problems that we face back home, is the availability of illegal chemical abortion. And access to it is easy. There's no certainty of what you're getting. There's no, of course, monitoring the women and taking care of them through the process. It's just, again, the ugly abortion industry in motion. But here's a difference in how America differs from life here in South Africa. And for many people, it's quite different. The standard of living is much lower. You see many round huts, rural huts along the road as you drive through the mountains. It's very different. And that means that there are more dire consequences for the people that live here. And there are more women who have the desire to abort versus give their baby life.
Yeah. As you said, the similarities there, in some ways, that's kind of surprising, being in the United States, it's the other side of the world. It's easy to think maybe it's really different there, but well, we have to keep in mind, evil is evil no matter where you are, whether it's the United States, whether it's China, South Africa. It shouldn't be a surprise, I guess, that the same strategies are being implemented. The blueprint seems eerily similar. As we've had this conversation with our guests, it sounds an awful lot like what's happening in the United States with the legal fights and, chemical abortion, the same dirty strategies, the same dirty playbook where they couldn't care less about these women. They couldn't, that's the furthest thing from being on their mind is the health and the wealth of these women. It's profit motive. It's things like that. So hopefully in South Africa and, not just South Africa, but all over the entire world, people can continue doing what our fantastic guests have been doing in South Africa and pushing back, spreading education, informing people who, Brad, as you mentioned, may be suffering a little bit of a different lifestyle. They have different quality of life, maybe more intense consequences for what they choose.
Well, there are two different lifestyles here. Some Victor, are very westernized. Like if you go to Cape Town and Durban, you're in beautiful westernized cities. But then you go out into the rural area and you really see the difference between how the rural versus the city people live. And that's where you see poverty, you see difficulty, people crying out, living any way that they can.
I guess one of the differences too, that reminds me, we talked earlier about witch doctors and their role as it pertains to abortion. That's definitely a difference, but evil is evil. It has many faces.
And it's expressed in many demonic ways. When you have voodoo, when you have witchcraft, you have some ghastly demonic responses and reactions by people who are under those powers.
Yeah. Again, I say maybe it's different that there's witchcraft, but now that you say that, it reminds me in the United States, we have the Satanic Temple. And the Satanic Temple is doing a very similar thing. They're coming out and telling people, listen, this is a sacrifice. This is a religious ritual. And they're putting up billboards. So again, I say maybe it's different. Well, maybe it's really not.
Absolutely.
Well, that wraps it up for this week's episode of Straight Talk on Life Issues. Again, a very special one. Very cool to have Brad joining us from South Africa. The stories, the experiences, absolutely awesome. You can find more information. Again, as always, go to our website, lifeissues.org. You can find information about Doctors for Life International, Aid to Africa. We have resources for Dr. Albu's new book, Drugs, Facts, Arguments, and Practical Advice. Everything that you're going to need. Again, I encourage you, go to lifeissues.org. And as always, we appreciate so greatly those of you who make our mission possible through your generous donations, your continued support, which, by the way, is tax deductible. We appreciate that greatly. And we would love to hear from you. You can go to lifeissues.org. Let us know what you thought about today's podcast, and be sure to tune in next week for more Straight Talk on Life Issues.